Hey guys, what's going on? I hope everyone is staying healthy out there. I know if you're living in the US, especially maybe other areas, moving into spring weather, allergies are starting to kick up. It's not fun. I live in Kentucky, probably one of the worst areas for allergies. At least I feel like it is. Definitely been taking a lot of allergy medicine lately, and I'm hoping that's all it is. But I hope you guys have been doing well. Today, I sat down to do a video on what I thought was going to be Stagnite and how much damage you can do because I had a comment left on one of my videos recently talking about they see Stagnite mention that he can do really good damage, and he can do good damage for sure, but they never see him actually built to do damage, more so just to apply his debuffs. And that is 100% the case. Like, I've always built him that way, never really built him for the damage. So I sat down and I was going to compare him to another champion, Zargala. Well, when I started to do that and was actually going to start comparing them, I realized a few things. First off, they're opposite affinities. Zargala's Force, Stagnite's Spirit. So therefore, they wouldn't be a good way to compare them. I'd have to attack a void enemy, and that's going to be difficult to find anyways. I wanted to do the Doom Tower, so I didn't waste resources. Well, I also realized another thing. Zargala has a very specific text and a very specific order to her text that actually makes her able to do more damage potentially than Stagnite would in a fair comparison with no debuffs already applied to the enemy. And I want to go over that. And I actually haven't seen this talked about too much, and that is the text and how specific wordings in the text can make a massive difference in how the champion actually performs. So I got a list of about 6, I think, champions or so. The reason why I'm not going over necessarily all of the champions and just more so the champions that come to my mind right now, and that'll probably be the most popular. And if you have some champions in mind that you know of, definitely leave it down in the comment section below. But I want this to be more of a long-term video so that any champions who are released in the future, you'll start reading their actual abilities, reading their skill set, and especially the order of the skills, and realize, hey, this may actually be better than what I originally thought because this places here, or this is not actually as good as what I thought because it does after the fact, which we'll get into that a little bit more. So let's jump on in here and I'll show you exactly what I was talking about with Zargala. And while I'm doing this, don't forget to leave a like on the video if you haven't already. Drop a comment down below a little bit later once you see the more of the video, of course, and then subscribe if you're enjoying this content. So looking at Zargala, we have our ability 3. I'm just going to only go over the abilities that are going to be impacted based on what the content of this video is about. I don't want to go over all of their abilities, not a champion guide, just a spotlight on these specific skill text orders. So Zargala, she says, attacks all enemies 3 times. After the first hit, has a 50% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. So she hits them for the first time. There's no chance of applying anything. But then both the hits after that, each of them have a chance of applying decreased defense. So her first hit will be into the target's full amount of defense, assuming there's no decreased defense already applied. But then her second hit and her third hit both have a chance of applying that decreased defense debuff, allowing her next hit to do even more damage, ideally. So she, in this specific case, would have already been in a better spot to do more damage than Stagnite, assuming I didn't apply decreased defense at all, because she would have a chance, well, one, she attacks 3 times, but also she has a chance to apply her own decreased defense debuff and then attack into said decreased defense debuff. So she is one of the attack-based examples we're going to give. So the next champion I want to talk about is going to be Rugnor. So Rugnor is a champion who I use quite a bit. I used him in Faction Wars. I used him in Doom Tower. I used him in Spiders even. His A3 ability, there's a few reasons why it's very good, but it places a 50% increased attack buff. So obviously he doesn't need a champion to apply increased attack to himself. He'll apply it to himself. And then it has a 75% chance, I believe 100% when booked, of placing 25% weakened debuff on the target for 2 turns. Now, if you haven't picked up on it already, the key thing we see here is that it does not say attacks an enemy first. The very first thing is places his buff, places the weakened debuff, and he also has a 75% chance, 100% chance when booked, of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff on the target for 2 turns before attacking. Now, his is very explicit in saying all of this before attacking. Sometimes the champions are a little bit more sneaky and you have to really read into it to make sure the ordering is correct. But most of the time, I guess they do a pretty good job of breaking this down. But the important thing I want you guys to take from this is, one, he is void affinity, so he's never going to get a weak hit. The only thing that's going to stop him from landing this debuff is his accuracy. So if he doesn't have enough accuracy, he can miss the debuffs. He already, if you have him booked, he's going to have a 100% chance to land it. So have a 100% chance there, no chance to miss, no chance to weak hit, and the only thing you have to make sure you hit is the accuracy number. The reason why this is so helpful is obviously he's a strong attacking champion. So if he's placing the decreased defense and the weaken before he's even hitting the enemy, he's going to get him debuffed. He's going to hit him. It's going to hit for a lot more damage than if he never placed those two debuffs before. So it really helps. You don't have to bring a debuffer to go before him. He does his own debuffs perfectly. So speaking of the weak hits, I do want to mention that in case you guys didn't know, if you don't hit an enemy, you don't have a chance of actually getting a weak hit. In the example of Shatterbones, applies debuffs, places 15% decreased speed debuff on all enemies for 2 turns, fills the turn meter of all allies by 25%. So he applies a debuff, but he doesn't actually do any damage. There's no attacks all enemies or any type of text written on this at all. So he cannot actually get a weak hit. The only way he would miss this is if the percentage chance to land this didn't hit, which there is no percentage chance to land this, or if the accuracy he has is lower than their resistance, or if there's just a simple 3% chance to be resisted all the time activates. So the only thing to make sure this ability lands on champions who have similar texts is the accuracy being high enough, because there's never going to be a weak hit. Now, the next champion I want to talk about is going to be Astralon. Now, Astralon was the recent fusion, or a few fusions ago, depending on when you're watching this video, but his ability 3. This is another one that really breaks it down pretty well. Removes all buffs from targets under Veil or Perfect Veil, places 25% weaken on enemies who have Veil or Perfect Veil buffs removed, then attacks all enemies. Also has a 75% chance of placing stun debuff on all enemies. So this ability is especially helpful and especially good, even better, because it removes all those veils, removes the perfect veils, applies the weaken, and then he attacks all the enemies. After attacking, he places a stun. So hopefully you're going to be able to start reading into some of these champions a little bit more. Champions like Fane, they have it a little bit more. You got to actually pay attention to it because it says attacks all enemies, and then you have the debuffs being shown afterwards. This is a better example. Attacks all enemies right here, and then the debuffs being applied later on. But if you read into it, it says the first hit has a 75% chance of placing decreased defense. If that's placed, then your next hit's going to do a little bit more damage. If that next hit also places the weaken, then it's going to do a little bit more damage on that third hit. So champions like Fane are a little bit more hidden, a little bit more secretive, it seems, when their text is being written out. Now, the next one is Anax. I want to show you guys him real quick. He has a very similar ability. Each hit has a 75% chance of placing decreased accuracy, which that doesn't really affect the extra damage, but this one does. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 30% chance of placing decreased defense. So if his first hit applies the decreased defense, his next hit is going to do a little bit more damage. Now, with these recent damage dealing champions, this specific skill text order may not seem like a massive deal. Now, champions like Ragnar, you can definitely take advantage of this. Have him go in a team. If you're going against a boss, you don't necessarily have to worry about another debuff champion going before him because he applies his own. Same thing with Zargala. But champions this really applies to and is very important to are champions, specifically Mausoleum Mage. And this is the one that I had to take a video recording of earlier to show you guys that this does not work quite how I believe it should. I wish, and this has been complained about before, I wish this block debuffs was at the beginning of this ability. Now, a lot of situations, this is perfectly fine. But if you're going through the Doom Tower, if you're going through the arena, and you're running against the Torment waves, this can be a disaster. So, let's go in here and look at my arena log real quick, and I'll show you guys that I was attacking. I attacked win now, lose later. I lost a lot right now. I attacked him several times because I wanted to make sure I got a clip of this actually activating to show you guys that you do want to pay attention to the order of the skills and how important it is. And even if you test it a few times and it doesn't work, test it a little bit more because it may not work as you expect. So I went into this battle and I have my Mausoleum Mage in immunity gear. So you'll see the little block debuffs already applied to him. He's in immunity gear. Lysandra uses her increased speed. So you'll see both of these champions got frozen. Well, herself and Mortu got frozen. That's not a big deal. I think they end up killing me here. Not a big deal though. But right here towards the end of the video, the first time I tried buffing up with Mausoleum Mage, nobody got frozen. And it took me several matches to actually get the example that I wanted to show you guys, which should be right here. So she buffs up everybody right there. Iron Brago takes his turn. Mortu takes his turn. They're both unfrozen now, but this is the part you want to pay attention to. Press play. So he buffs everybody up. When he does, they have the block debuffs now, but they're also frozen. So if you know what Tormund does, Tormund has a chance to freeze whenever enemies get a turn meter increase, whenever they get buffs applied, and similar things like that. So what happens is Mausoleum Mage is placing the increase crit rate, he's placing the increased defense, and both of those buffs have a chance of freezing the allies he's placing them on, and then he places the block debuffs ability, which, if that was simply at the very beginning, then they wouldn't get the freeze applied to them at all. Now, whenever you have Mausoleum Mage, before you get him ascended to 3 stars, he doesn't even have the block debuffs ability. So I kind of understand why this applies in the way it does, because like I said, before he's 3-star ascended, all this text isn't even there. So it makes sense, but keep that in mind. If you're running him and you think you can go against Tormund's, keep in mind that he still has a high chance of freezing your allies whenever he's casting his own buffs on the enemies, even though he has block debuffs. Another champion I want to mention, who's also a support champion and very, very helpful. Now with her, I do believe you also want to gear her with immunity gear, though she doesn't have the same issue as Mausoleum Mage does. She's actually worded much better, and this champion is Battle Sage. So Battle Sage has an ability too, which places a 50% increase attack buff on all allies for 2 turns. Now, this ability can freeze your allies, okay? So it is a buff, and it can freeze them if you're going against a Tormund. But after that, she removes all debuffs from all allies. So if the allies do get frozen, she'll remove those debuffs from all allies, and it's perfect. So if you're running Battle Sage with another buff champion or something similar, this is perfectly fine, because if she's in immunity gear, she'll already have the block debuffs applied to herself, and then once it's her turn, she'll cleanse everybody else. Now, she doesn't place a block debuffs up, so you got to keep in mind that if you do use her, you want to use her for the arena, for example. You want to use her right before your nuke champion goes, so that everything has already been applied. No more buffs will be applied after that, because if there's any more buffs applied after she removes them, your other allies can still get frozen by Tormund later on, just based on how the turns go and everything like that. So those were the champions I wanted to talk about, guys. I really want to mention, definitely read the order of the skills, because it can be a big difference on how the champion actually performs. It can make them be decent, or it can make them be very, very good. In the case of Ragnar, I think he's significantly better because of doing both of those abilities before he attacks. And if I didn't emphasize it enough, doing those abilities before they attack allows them to not get weak hits. Because like I said, if you don't attack the enemy, if you don't hit them, if you haven't hit them yet, you can't get a weak hit. So obviously, Ragnar is void, so he's never going to get a weak hit anyways. But champions like Astralon, he won't get a weak hit trying to remove the buffs before applying his debuffs, because his attack comes after he does all of his first start of his abilities. So keep that in mind. This could change how you build some champions. Hopefully this helps you out, guys. Hopefully it sheds some new light on some of these champions. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you in the next one.